Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. Today, I'm your host, Alex, and I'm joined by my friends Jem and Matt. Before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem for some exclusive content. Or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com. For this episode, we'll be covering neurodivergent gamers and neurodiversity in gaming generally as well. And we're joined once again by the wonderful Georgia, who's back for another episode. She didn't hate us, so that's great. So I'm going to kick off with the first question for you, Georgia, particularly. What does gaming mean to you as an autistic person?
Wow, that's a big one. So I think in a word, safety. I think gaming is a safe space in a world which is really unpredictable and really not built for people like me.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is too bright and too loud and just too much quite a lot of the time when I step outside the front door. And from inside the safety of my own home, I can explore these amazing, vast places without the horrific sensory experiences that I might have if I actually went out and stood on a mountain, and I would be too cold with the wind blowing my hair around, and I would be thinking about that instead of how beautiful the vista was. Whereas if I'm in a game, I have all the enjoyment of the amazing vistas and things like that without the horrific sensory experiences that go with it. So it's that safety and having a safe space. I think also my particular brand of autism is I have aphantasia, which is not being able to see pictures in your head. So my mind's eye is blind, if that makes sense. So I love stories and I love reading, but when I'm reading a book, I have no visual images in my head. When I play a game, I have the same rich, incredible stories, but I can see everything, and it's fully immersive, and it's such a powerful experience to be able to be in a world and controlling what's going on and experiencing it and being able to see it in a way that I can't necessarily do when I'm reading a book.
Wow, that's so cool. Do you think, because I know you were diagnosed late as autistic, so has the way you think about gaming changed before and after the diagnosis?
I think so. I think I recognise now kind of what's going on when I get fixated on games, because I'm the kind of person who I get completely immersed and hyperfixated on the game, and I have very little. Part of my autism as well is I have really terrible what's called interoception skills, which is being able to read your own internal body signals. So I have no idea when I need to use the toilet or when I need to eat or drink or anything like that. And I can get completely lost in a game, get up and I'll think, oh, I'll just hop on that game for half an hour, and then it's the evening, and where has the day gone? So I don't think knowing that I was autistic helped me understand why that happens, and it also helped me put in place strategies for making sure that I have a big bottle of water next to me when I start gaming, or making sure that I have little notes to remind me to you need to come off the game, or even setting a timer. I hopped on a game before I knew I was coming on this podcast, and I set a timer to make sure that I would get off 10 minutes before I was due to come on, so that I didn't overrun and spend the whole evening on it.
Yeah. Wow, that's good. That's good to know. So when we think about neurodiversity in gaming and who games are designed for and things, do you think, this is a question for everybody, do you think neurodiversity and neurodiverse people are considered in the way that games are developed and made?
I think that we're still grappling with the extremely antiquated way of thinking that there are two kinds of people. There are normal and then there are special. And that games are made for quote unquote normal people, and so there's one speed, and if you can't keep up then you don't get to play. Whereas I'd never heard of aphantasia before, so that shows that, and autism is a spectrum of many different variants, and so that's what games should be focusing on, is going, wow, taking the challenge of finding the autism spectrum and all the list of disorders and lots of the issues that come along with autism spectrum, and going, how do we make our game accessible to these things? They could have an in-game option of it sets a timer for you, and it says, so you don't have to manage it yourself, just go, oh, would this help? Would that help? And yeah, the first step is going, oh yeah, everything is a spectrum about us, about humans. Everything is a spectrum. There is no normal and special. And then once game designers go from there, and there's also the galling part of how incredibly creative the process of making games accessible is. Coming up with these ideas of going, oh my god, no one's ever thought of how we can help with things like that. And game designers refuse to see the creative challenge in it. And it's another galling thing.
Completely agree. I mentioned in the previous podcast that I was in that I'm a teacher. I actually work with neurodivergent children in a specialist setting. So neurodivergent teacher teaching neurodivergent children. And when you're teaching what's still known as special needs teaching, the number one rule of teaching special needs children is actually if you direct your lessons to them, so if you consider almost them as the target audience and you deal with their needs, that actually raises the quality of the lesson for everyone. So everyone benefits from the extra work that you do to support students with special educational needs. And I think you can apply that to games as well. Every gamer will benefit if we take into account, like, non-autistic people, I'm sure, would benefit from having a timer set in a game like that. Yeah. An amazing
There's
idea.
been many a time when I've forgotten to eat because I've been gaming and things as well, when I'm really into a game. So it would definitely benefit me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with the point you just made, Georgia. It's a really personally relevant for me, but it is just as something that I think is so important, and I think it just underlines the idea that equality and equity, working towards those situations for society, will just benefit everyone. Everyone benefits from making society a more accessible environment, and it's frustrating that it's still viewed as being as giving special dispensation, giving extra to people. And I think that makes everyone feel rubbish. To be fair, it just makes everyone feel rubbish, and it shouldn't really be approached in that way. I'm really interested in your thoughts on whether there's a flip side to gaming for people who are neurodivergent, just simply because of things like hyperfocus, because of overwhelm, because of perhaps not being aware of risks in online games and all of those things. If there's any concerns around gaming as an obvious way of tackling some of the challenges that some people might face, but that have the flip side of also maybe negative side effects around that.
I think that's a really good point. I've definitely avoided MMOs because I worry about my communication and the way that other people might communicate with me, and I just don't want to deal with that when I'm in a game. Like I'm in my happy place, I'm in my safe space. I don't want to be dealing with other people, which is something that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and that puts me off then playing those kind of games. I have played Palia, which is marketed as an MMO. I'm not sure it should necessarily be considered one, but it is technically an MMO, but it's a cozy style game. And you have to work together with other players online in order to get the resources in the world. And I found that very accessible, and that was quite nice because the way that the game was structured is that it was entirely cooperative and you had to help each other in order to progress. And if you didn't work with other people, you couldn't progress very far in the game. And there was nothing at all competitive about it. So there was no real ability for people to, be a bit of a dick about it, really. The resource drops for everyone is exactly the same if you participated. So I think that there's that kind of thing can be helpful. That's a definite positive, but otherwise I think I've tried to stay away from online games. So I don't have a lot of experience with them just because I find the whole concept a bit scary, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to stay away from online gaming for the same reasons as well. I think the only time I've ever experienced voice chat was when I started playing GTA 5 online, and it's like automatically on. And it was the scariest thing ever. I felt really violated. I was like, ugh, someone I don't know has just spoken to me out of my controller. Ugh. It was horrible. So I immediately turned it off because I was like, I don't want people I don't know talking to me, and it's weird. But yeah, I was going to touch on the point that Jem raised about, like, we've talked a lot on previous episodes in the pod about how one of the massive positives for us as gamers is that gaming is such a great form of escapism for us, and like George had mentioned, it's a safe space. It feels very safe for us. It's a place where we can go to kind of let go of everything going on outside in the rest of the world. But we also talk a lot on the pod about how safe online spaces are in gaming, and whether there should be more done to sort of safeguard those online spaces, particularly in big online multiplayer games and things, especially when you think about children in those spaces as well, and the potential safeguarding issues. Do you think that autistic gamers, if they were to game in those spaces, would be more at risk?
I think so. I think it depends on your brand of autism. Like Matt said, it's a spectrum, or I think even the term they're using now is like an umbrella.
Okay, yeah.
Rather than a spectrum, because it's that understanding that it's not just a scale from high functioning to low functioning. There's so many different aspects to autism. And if you happen to have a brand of autism where you find communication really challenging, then you're going to find communication challenging in whether it's in person, face to face, or whether it's online. There are benefits to as being an autistic person and communicating using games, because you have a focus to the conversation. What generally unites autistic people in terms of conversation is we hate small talk. We hate that whole kind of like, how's the weather? Well, how are you doing? Like that question, how are you? That I hate that question. It's so broad. But I'm quite happy to hop on a game and be talking about the game because I have a focus and I have a thing that I'm talking about. So I think that there are definite benefits for autistic gamers in terms of them being able to build communication skills using games, especially younger ones, but they are also more vulnerable to the online risks and the people who are in those spaces who are not going to treat them as safe spaces.
Yeah, that's definitely something we've touched on the pod before, that increasingly these spaces are being used by people with malintent to exploit other people, particularly younger people. In fact, I think it'll probably be a topic for another episode in future where we talk about the election and what the government plans to do to safeguard online spaces. But do you think that for non-disabled and non-neurodivergent people, there's a misconception about gaming and autism? It's a tricky one.
Yeah, 100%, because there's,
Yeah.
again, it comes down to stereotypes, because
Yeah.
there's things that you think of autistic people, they're like trains. They're like train
Yeah.
timetables, and they don't like loud noises. And reducing it to these
Things that they've heard that they
just
don't know
reductive
yeah.
of things that don't help anyone.
No.
If you have an awareness of neurodivergency and all the diversity of that, then you can start breaking down those misconceptions that just place another barrier in the way of people making places accessible. Because if you don't understand something, then you can't make the right space for it. And it's a problem with capitalism in our society that, like you touched on earlier, there are people who can go at the one speed without any trouble, and then there are people who can't. And then like for example, some people can work a 40-hour work week consistently with no trouble, and then there are people who they can't do that. Doing that will make them very ill, and so they need to have less workload. But then that isn't fair to the person who can work the 40-hour work week. And then the problem is the people who can keep up that speed go, oh, I don't like the people who can't, rather than thinking, why do I have to go at this speed? Who decided that I have to go at this speed? And the one speed thing is so devastatingly damaging to everyone, really, and especially children growing up. So we talked about this in our education episode recently. The children, as long as they don't die and they go to school, that's it. That's all that matters. And I'm sure you have the experience with the pupils that you teach. They need a different kind of education to children, other kinds of children. A blind child needs a different kind of education to a deaf child, and a neurodivergent person needs a different kind of education to someone who doesn't have neurodivergency. And
yeah,
it's bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And it needs to be built from the ground up as well. It can't be something that's tacked on afterwards. The school that I work in, I was involved in building that school. That's my weird pandemic story, is that I helped build a special needs school. And we really had to think from the beginning, from the ground up, like what kind of building were we going to be in where it was a sensory safe space, so we deliberately had a building that was carpeted, that had, where they don't have echoing going on. And we really had to think about things like uniform, and from the ground up, we had to really build it. And I think that the gaming industry needs to do the same thing. They need to be getting neurodivergent people in at the earliest stages of game concept and building it in from the ground up, not building a game and then trying to tack it on afterwards.
For sure. That's a running theme with the neurodiversity and also a disability. It's often an afterthought that's tacked on after the fact rather than built in from the ground up. So completely agree with you there. Yeah. Jem, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to share? I realise you haven't mentioned.
I have lots of thoughts.
Yeah.
But I think that what we talked about in the last episode about the elitism of gaming and the gaming world is where the problem lies, and tackling that would make the whole system more accessible to people, whatever their needs. And I think that we have a very stereotypical view of what autism is. And I think we can thank Rayman for that largely. And I think we are slowly moving on from that. And I know that there's loads of really cool young autistic people who are doing vlogging and podcasts and gaming on Twitch and things like that, and so they are starting to really kind of blow that those misconceptions apart and show that, you know, as George has said, you know, autism comes in many different brands and varieties, and umbrella is such a nice term for it, really. And I think, you know, it's time that we recognised that, as Matt said, there's no such thing as normal, and we need to, because of that, you can't possibly design a game for everybody's individual requirements. And what you have to do is provide games that have the ability to switch things on, switch things off, change the colours, change the size of the text, have somebody reading to you. All of those things, I think, is what we need to be asking the games industry to work towards. And I think we will move in that direction slowly, because I think, you know, there is an increase in people who are either being late diagnosed or who are, you know, challenging the system for support with younger people. So I think there is an increase now in people who either have found out that they have some form of neurodiversity, or they know somebody who does. I mean, almost all of my close friends are being diagnosed with ADHD at the moment, and I don't say that with a sort of like, oh, you know, everyone's got ADHD. It makes perfect sense. You know, I can really understand it, and I'm really pleased for them, because finally they're finding a way to, you know, put that last piece in that puzzle. And just, you know, it isn't the solution to all of their problems, but it's at least a way for them to work towards finding solutions and to understanding that. So yeah, I think society's got a little way to go before we're properly supportive of everyone and all of their rainbow of needs.
I love the term rainbow of needs.
Yeah, that's a great term. It's interesting to think about it as well, especially the breakthroughs relatively recently in like understanding neurodiversity more generally in society, and how boys are so much more commonly diagnosed than girls are, and that's that intersection with sexism as well, which we do like to talk about a lot on the pod too, and how that impacts gaming. But yeah, it's certainly interesting. I wonder if there's a stat that says like the percentage of neurodivergent gamers in men and women, whether there's one that's higher than the other. That would be interesting to know. Unfortunately, I don't know if such a stat exists, but
I don't know that. I do know that. So I learned I was autistic when I went to a neurodiversity conference in 2021. That was organised by my school just as an autism training thing, and I was sat there thinking, oh my god, they're describing me. But the interesting statistic that they gave when I was there is that at that time in 2021, I don't know if this has changed since, there had been no studies at all on autism in women.
I can believe that.
Literally none, not one. All studies on autism up to 2021 had been male only, which I think is part of where this image that we've got has come from, of this very kind of, you know, Sheldon Cooper style of autism. And if we're going to change public attitudes, we also actually need to get the research in, and we need to change the way that they're, you know, we need to start calling for better research and more research in the different ways that neurodiversity presents.
For sure.
Absolutely. It's quite interesting because I know that it certainly was the case that the average boy is diagnosed with autism before the age of 5. The average girl will be diagnosed with autism by the age of 15. So, you know, and the problem is that by the time you're 15, you've already gone through a large portion of your education, all of the social dramas that happen in, you know, up to that point. I mean, with no support, struggling your way through and trying to find a way to understand why the world doesn't make sense to you in the way that apparently it makes sense to other people. And, you know, I think it doesn't surprise me at all that there's been little or no research into women with autism. And I think that autistic women, I think that it is a real problem that we have this idea that, you know, men are the norm and everything else is like some kind of aberration off the back of sort of the cis white male, and we've really got to get over that. It's holding everyone back.
Misogyny and sexism in academia and research is a catastrophic problem, because the stereotypical thing to say is that if men had periods, they would be solved by now. They would never be a problem for anyone. It would just be you take one pill once a year and then you never have a period until you take the second pill, and then you can have a period again. Because it's areas where I imagine that when it comes to boys, people look at them and go, "Oh, he needs something special. He's a boy. If something's not quite right, we need to get him fixed, because he's supposed to a boy that turns into a proper man." But with girls, I imagine that for most of history, the professors and research just said, "Oh, they're just being difficult. They're just typical girlies being difficult." Not that they are just as diverse in their needs and requirements as boys are. You just go, "Oh, she's being hysterical. She's not furious that she can't have a bank account and that she can't go outside without having a man. And if she gets divorced, then she's going to be thought of as disgusting. And she's having a career and she's not having children. She's not hysterical. She's legitimate things that are just brushed off because the people in charge of making those decisions are stuck in that way." So it doesn't surprise me either that there hasn't been any research on that.
There we go. Well, I think we've just about covered everything in that episode, really, as we always like to do on our episodes at Gaming the System. So thank you everybody for watching and listening, and thank you again, Georgia, for being such an excellent guest. It's been a real pleasure. And
thank you.
We'll hopefully, well, if you want to come back, you're always welcome to come back for other episodes if you would like in the future. And I hope you've enjoyed being a part of the podcast as well.
Thank you. I've had a lot of fun this evening. So yes, thank you.
Fantastic stuff. And thank you both, Jem and Matt, for your insight as well. And if you have any thoughts you'd like to share, please let us know. Like and subscribe and share it with your friends as well. If you think they'd be interested, let them know. And as always, we have new episodes coming out every Thursday. And if you're in the south of England or near to it, on the 15th of June, we'll be having our live show at the Chichester Fringe in Chichester. So have a look on our social media for more information on that. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye.